All right, people, we're back. It's another episode of Fun and Truth in Black and White with Pat and Jay. What's up? What's up? What's up? Pat, what's going on, man? Tonight's episode is crossovers and change of directions.
What's up, people? Good evening. Jay, you're a basketball head, right?
I'm a basketball head.
What basketball player that you've seen on any level has had the best crossover and change of direction?
Ooh. All right. You got to say Tim Hardaway first. I mean, he was the killer crossover. But I'm going to throw one at you that most people don't think of, and that's Tiny Archibald, who was badass.
Great pick.
Yeah.
I'm going to hit you with two names. First, my favorite player. I'm not saying he's the best player of all time, but my favorite player of all time, Allen Iverson.
Okay.
Sick
Definitely
crossover.
a sick crossover.
And locally, I got to say this, from the Bronx, New Yorker, did great at Providence. I don't think he made it to the pros. He didn't have a jumper. His shot was challenged. God, Sham God.
God, Sham
First of all,
wow.
if your name is God, right?
Yeah.
Something about you is going to be special. And his crossover, it was obscene. Like, there's still dudes whose ankles are broken.
Well, there's still dudes thinking about the fact that his name is God Sham.
Off the top. Anyway, crossovers and change of directions, that's the title. As a native New Yorker, Jay, we got to talk about something very important. It's near and dear to the whole planet. But particularly for us, in an extra way, I'm not going to say it's stronger because the whole world was affected by 9/11, 2001. Let's start with, where were you?
So I was supposed to be in the building, and thank God I overslept. But I remember that day like it was yesterday. I was awakened by my phone at my desk. My best friend called me to let me know that a plane had just flown into the World Trade Center. And I hung up the phone, immediately shocked, realized, called her right back, and said, wait a second, you just said a plane flew into the World Trade Center. And she said, yeah, I was calling because you're supposed to be there. And I'm so glad you're not. And I said, but you're down there. And she said, well, I'm several blocks away, but I know you were supposed to be in the building. Hung up the phone. I immediately called because I was supposed to be meeting with a group of investors that had been arranged through Cantor Fitzgerald to invest in my company at the time. And I had overslept because I stayed up all night working on the presentation, obsessing about every little detail because I had never been in a situation or an opportunity like this before. And so I called him up, and the guy who I was dealing with said, get your ass down here. Plane flew into the other building, and, we're waiting on you. So I immediately, packed my shit up, ran out the door. There was a train, there that I was just about to make, and I got to the platform, and they announced that there were no more trains going into the city. So at this point, I called up my mother. And I don't know why I called up my mother, but it was just something where I think I felt a sense of shame and disappointment in myself for oversleeping. And I didn't understand what was going on yet. And my mother was so happy to hear from me. And she was just like, I was terrified, where are you? And I said, well, I'm at the Rosedale train station, headed into the city, and they just announced there's no service. And she said, two planes just, hit the the Twin Towers. I said, what do you mean two planes? And she said, another plane just hit. At that point, I pick up the phone and I, call back to my guy at Cantor, and the phone lines are dead at this point. And then I couldn't reach anybody. I was stuck on the train platform for a couple of minutes. And I started to walk home, and I called my mother again. And at this point, she's panicking to, reach my father and my sister, who both work downtown. And she's watching the TV, and I'm walking home, and we're just talking on the phone about what's going on. And suddenly it starts to sink in. 2 planes have just hit the World Trade Center. And I suddenly realize that we're under attack. And the world has just completely changed. And I was supposed to be in those buildings, or in one of the buildings. And I get back to the office, and I turn on the TV, and I see the smoke coming out of the buildings. And I'm suddenly frozen with fear. I mean, I can still feel the hair on the back of my neck standing at full attention, because this is surreal. And the news, everybody, there's choppers out there, and the worst part about it for me is that in the back of my head, I'm saying, oh my God, what if these buildings fall down, and the wreckage they're going to do to the buildings around them, and all the people and everything else. And then we start seeing people jumping out of the buildings. And, it was just such a terrifying, overwhelming day. And thankfully, my friends and family, except for, my one buddy who had originally arranged that meeting, Mike Parks, God rest his soul and rest in peace, he was in the building and did not make it out. Yes, a lot of families lost loved ones. The emergency response by the first responders and the fire crew, the fire engines and the firemen all over the city, and the police. I mean, everybody who tried to rescue people out of the buildings, there will never be enough thoughts and prayers and love expressed for their sacrifice, and for the men and women who took up the cause to fight for our freedom after that. But yeah, it changed my life. I immediately shifted my focus from being a .com kid and decided to go in a direction of environmental development and try to help the world get off of oil. Because in the back of my mind, I saw this as something that had to do with the fact that we were just too rich and spoiled, and our dependency on oil was just too much. So for my part, I decided to go into real estate and focus on wind and solar development and creating green buildings, and that's been my life ever since. So that's what 9/11 is for me.
I wonder if the delayed reaction was, we should take a poll, because I remember having a delayed reaction as well. So that stood out to me as you spoke. I don't think I've ever spoken this candidly with anybody about it, But it happened on a Tuesday.
That's right.
I played basketball on a Sunday and had like a little minor injury, nothing crazy, but enough that I went to work Monday and I took Tuesday off. Like, I realized I didn't let myself rest enough, so I was home in bed, and I can remember it happened in the morning. A good friend of mine called me and said, Pat, a plane just flew into one of the towers. A plane just flew into one of the towers. So I'm like, my first reaction was sarcasm. I don't know if you remember, at the time, there were planes crashing, there were inept pilots, there were things happening in the news that weren't terrorist acts.
That's correct.
But just like, remember, at the time, you're on a plane and the plane lands safely, everybody would clap.
That's right.
Sarcastically.
That was a big thing. Yeah.
So my first thought was, and I think it's a defense mechanism, honestly, because I'm not stupid. Something's very wrong with a plane flying into a building, but my first thought was kind of like sarcasm, like, oh, another plane, another bad pilot.
Yeah.
I knew that really wasn't what it was, but that was my first thought. And he paused and didn't say anything to me. And what felt like 2 minutes later, it probably was a few seconds later, I said, oh shit. Like it hit me delayed.
Yeah.
About the attack. Now, as that happened, the second plane hit. So now I went from 0 to 100 in terms of like concern, worry, panic. So even then, though, it's still like you're watching a movie.
Yeah.
Because, you're used to hearing such and such got shot. Not that it's okay, but you're used to hearing like when you left the barbecue, it got shot up.
Yeah.
As soon as you got off the train, a fight broke out. Like stuff like that. You don't hear that a plane is flown into a building.
The most iconic building in the world.
And, other than Pearl Harbor, the most devastation caused.
That's correct.
In one single act. So
yeah.
that, it just may not sound that sexy or cool or dramatic, but that literally was what happened. I got the phone call. It woke me up out of sleep. My first reaction was like in denial. Then by the time it hit me, the severity of it, it happened again.
Yeah.
And then I begin to do a mental checklist in my mental Rolodex of who in my family, when I say family, I mean family and friends, of course, is working in that area.
Yeah.
So you begin to make a bunch of phone calls and no one's answering.
Right.
So that's the next stage.
Yep.
Right? And then eventually, I'm one of the lucky ones. I didn't lose anybody.
Yeah.
And, it's funny. People, every day, most people, whether they pray or hope and wish, they want $2 million, they want this, they want whatever, right? And sometimes you don't realize the blessings you have. Like, whether you're religious or not, doesn't matter, but there's good things happening in your life. So, like, that's a day. I'm from New York, born and raised. I have hundreds of people in the area of that explosion, and all of mine were safe.
Yeah.
So when I look at life, I'm like, I was lucky for that right there.
Yeah.
So then the aftermath. The most apparent aftermath was or is security measures in airports now.
Right.
That's really all when it started. The whole shoes off, strip search.
Yeah, you used to be able to just walk in with anything.
So that was a change. And what was bizarre, people would complain about that. And I'm like, this is your safety.
Right.
So it never bothered me. There were some negative fallouts, like every person that looked Middle Eastern was then harassed, and treated. And it's bad because, like, for example, when somebody says all Muslims do such and such.
Right.
You're from Brooklyn, so I know you know Muslims, like true devout Muslims. They are the most peaceful.
Yeah.
But what happens, there's these rogue Muslim groups that call themselves Muslim and that give peaceful Muslims such a bad name. So one of the other fallouts, in a way, was increased racism.
I was just about to say, the level of racism and discrimination and, truthfully, ignorance. The word or phrase towelhead became, it was disgusting how the world turned on any person that, whether they were religious or not. I remember having lots of, friends at NYU who were Sikh, and nobody understood, that Sikh was a completely different culture and religion. And, the amount of persecution that these people suddenly faced because of their choice in terms of, wrapping their head and just in general, how ignorant people were and not knowing different cultures and just discriminating based on how somebody looked. And what's interesting, so the two things that I most remember was the fact that as the day went on, I not only felt, as every other New Yorker felt, a sense of alarm and being in a war that we didn't know or understand. That we were under attack
on our soil.
That's right. But the second thing was that, Pat, we don't often discuss or talk about the fact that we are the first generation of integration. We're the first generation born into an American society where everybody was truly equal. The Bill of Rights was passed in 1964.
Legally equal.
Legally equal. Right. And it was actually being worked on. By the 70s when we were born, the majority of public and private entities were actually working on integration. There was a huge movement as we were growing up. I went to a private school that had only recently allowed men. It was a women's school that allowed men into the school, and then really, busted the doors down in terms of diversity. And, we failed to recognize how short our time span is in terms of all of these things. And then suddenly we're under attack and everything goes out the window. People don't care about anything but themselves. And if you don't look like them, they're suspicious of you.
So, there are no silver linings, right? But even what's happening in the country today, all it's really doing is providing a reflection of society. So I wouldn't call it a positive, but sometimes in the most extreme times, you find out a lot about yourself.
Yeah.
So, like, for example, with current leadership and things like that and things that are going on, I just want to, it's basically exposing how people actually are. Right? So when backs are against the wall and people begin to only care about themselves and point fingers and disparage, essentially that's who they were.
Yes.
All along. That's a whole other conversation for another day. I want to point out some other tidbits because, today and yesterday, everything has been kind of sad and, melancholy and solemn and talking about those who died. But there's some other tidbits about that that time and that era that I just want to bring up. So, Mayor Giuliani.
Yeah.
I remember he was, and I've never discussed this with you, and you might be on this side of it, but I remember he was being praised for doing such a good job. And
right.
I remember thinking to myself, you can't be praised for doing your job. Now, just because you have a job doesn't mean you're going to do it well. So I get it. And did he show some charisma? And yeah, no question. But I just want to say that was his job.
Yeah.
And he did his job. I am not going to insult him, but I am not going to build a statue of him either. Just my 2 cents.
I would also add that I think that there was a sense of him taking the spotlight for doing his job and making it much bigger than it really was, number one, because, the federal government was far more involved than, anybody else, number one. But number two is the fact that there was a lot of discomfort around Giuliani because he had acted like the Gestapo with the New York police force for years in terms of, really trying to crack down on crime. So it was one of those things where with the whole 9/11 and everything else, the police were already, forcing things in a certain direction, and now they had carte blanche.
Correct. I'm glad you mentioned the words federal government, because another tidbit about 9/11, and again, I'm just trying to present a different angle.
Yeah.
Aside from the whole sadness, is all the theories on government involvement. We are all smart enough to know that nothing's impossible.
Right.
And as you watch different documentaries, read different things, they're all believable.
Sure.
And the only thing you really walk away with is, wow, anything is possible.
Right.
And I think, honestly, that's the scariest feeling.
Right.
Because let's say, again, bring it back to our childhood. Let's say you know that you have beef on that block.
Yeah.
When you know exactly who your enemy is, you're scared to go to that block, but you know you're ready because you know who you have a problem with.
Right.
But if somebody tells you, you know what, you're in this house with a bunch of people, some of your friends, some of your family, some are on your team, you have enemies in that room, you don't know who they are. We think it's this group over here, but it could be anybody.
Yeah.
Now it's a different kind of unsettled feeling. So I think the theories on government involvement, our own government,
Yeah.
and being involved or being aware, and kind of the whole notion that we might have been sacrificed
Yeah.
for some other, that's scary. That's another thing I want to mention.
Sure. Absolutely.
Next, you mentioned you thought we were a little bit too rich and too spoiled and far too dependent on oil.
Yeah.
But I want to focus on the words too rich and too spoiled. You can't win a fight against someone who doesn't care if they lose.
Okay.
So if you're in war with a person who is anxious to get to the afterlife, you can't win,
Yeah.
right? So like, you're fighting to get back home.
Mm-hmm.
They're fighting to die and go home.
Right.
So I just think the whole too rich and too spoiled, I'm not saying we should not like nice things in this country and things of that nature. But what I'm saying is, though, while we admire architecture and different very nice things, there are corners of this world that don't care about any of that. So if we're fighting them, we might be trying to defend our nice things, but they're fighting for a whole other cause. And we're at a disadvantage when you care about certain things that they don't care about.
Right.
Right? It's another thing with the war. Another thing, Jay-Z, we talked about recently. He released the album on 9/11. And it went platinum. It's a classic, the Blueprint album. Again, it's a footnote on a very, very important day in history. But I'm bringing it up because, as you know, there's an overlap in everything. So it's something to note. There's a footnote about it. And talking about changes in the aftermath, we talked about security, right? Another change, at the time, I was partying heavy. Wednesday night through Sunday night. Sometimes Thursday through Sunday, but heavy. I was hitting all the clubs, right? And that was, at the time, pre 9/11, you had to dress up to go to clubs. 9/11 hit. Sometimes there are these weird reactions to things that you think are unrelated. But after that, they were allowing jeans and T-shirts. Like, in clubs, the same clubs. So again, I just think maybe it's a way of showing how things don't have to be that serious.
Right.
Because people were just appreciating the ability to get up in the morning.
Yeah.
And be alive. Yeah. You talked about the career changes or the goals, the changes in your goals afterward. It did not have that shift in direction for me. It affected some of the things I wrote about when I write my scripts. But moreover, it reminded me that I don't have control over as many things as I think. Like, I have control about what I do, what I say, where I go, who I speak with, etc.
Right.
But there are things far beyond my control, like the actions of others, and the one thing that none of us can measure is evil, right? Like, you know exactly how much money is in your bank account, right? Mm-hmm. There's like an ebb and flow of like hours worked, money made, and effort, and just different things. Like, if I work out this amount of hours, I'll be this strong, right? There's some control in your life, but you cannot control evil. And I think that in itself, in a vacuum, made us feel powerless that day. Yeah. And to this day, even talking about it right now, you know me, I'm not a very sappy person, but it's very unsettling all these years later, right? Like, you've been down there, you visit, and whenever you cross the bridge, I know it crosses your mind because it crosses my mind every time I drive to Manhattan. So things are never gonna be the same, man. And what's abnormal is the new reality.
Yeah, yeah. No, what I remember most in terms of the aftermath, number one, was that it took me years to accept that the Twin Towers weren't there anymore. I grew up watching them get built, and I was one of the first visitors in the towers, and in terms of being from Brooklyn and traveling, and I think that's another thing, was that because I started traveling from when I was very young, and I would go to other places, and people would be like, "Oh, you're from New York," and I'd be like, "Yeah, that's right. I'm from Brooklyn."
Yo, listen, we have to do an entire episode on that.
Yeah.
And I love so many cities, but when I tell you, saying you're from New York,
and then telling them you're from Brooklyn, they're like, "Oh, okay."
But anyway, go
But
ahead.
one of the biggest things is crossing the Brooklyn Bridge and the image of the two towers looming over downtown New York. And as a kid, I used to go to the South Street Seaport and hang out, and go over to the World Trade Center. My father worked in downtown. I had an aunt who used to hang out there, take me to the Fireman's Museum and a couple of other places. So I had all these great memories. And, afterwards, after 9/11, and every time I would cross the Brooklyn Bridge and the towers weren't there, it was just so, I felt naked. I felt bare. And for years afterwards, many years afterwards, I actually avoided the city. Number one, because I still felt like we were under attack. It took me years to really resolve to myself that we were safe. And the second thing was that, again, I shifted my focus to being environmental and trying to create a better quality of life for people. And somehow the reality of what you just talked about, materialism, became so superfluous to my life that even to this day, I have a very difficult time understanding even what you're talking about, the appreciation for architecture, the appreciation for material things. I've lost all of that. And that came from 9/11. And I was a film school student. I graduated from Tisch. I worked for MTV. I was in the thick of everything that was media, entertainment, material. And I just lost it. When you talk about the fact that you were in the club scene, I know exactly what you're talking about. And for me, I was never a big club person. I liked going out every once in a while. But I think after 9/11, what was fascinating to me was how people decided, exactly as you said, that it wasn't that serious. That suddenly going out was more about, just going out than having to look good and show off to go out. So,
I mean, clubbing is not church.
No.
No. Listen, much respect to all those who protect us and who take their shields and responsibilities seriously.
Yeah, we will never forget.
Yeah, and for all those who pass, rest in peace.
All right, we're going to take a break. We'll be right back. All right, we're back. This is Fun and Truth in Black and White with Pat and Jay. Pat, very somber first segment, but let's start with a exciting announcement for everybody. Thursday, October 3rd, we are going to be live at Mini Bar in Brooklyn. And DJ Mikey Palms will be spinning for us again. The address is 482 Court Street in Brooklyn, New York. That's right. We will be back in Brooklyn. All right.
We should invite the Beastie Boys, man.
That's right. That's right. Well, Mikey, you hear it. We need the Beastie Boys there.
No, seriously, come out. It's going to be great, better than the last. And let's keep moving forward. Thanks for your support.
And we will be back at Vibe Lounge soon. We'll be making an announcement about that probably on the next episode. But Thursday, October 3rd, we'll be at the Mini Bar in Brooklyn. Pat, Hollywood celebrities are embracing pansexuality. Give me an idea here. Pansexuality is the love of all sexes.
Yeah, I believe that's exactly right. They say instead of being heterosexual, homosexual, or bisexual, you're all sexual.
Right.
This is not new. Like, the label is new.
That's right.
The trend is new. But I remember, reading things many, many, many years ago and viewing things many, many years ago where there were people, and I'm, predominantly women I've seen speaking about they were just sexual beings.
Yeah.
And they had to have relations with, when they're in the mood, when the mood strikes them, they would have relations with objects in the room, or whatever person they felt the connection with.
Okay.
Male, female, what have you.
Right.
But they didn't have any label to it. They just, and some have spoken to me directly, and it's like, I'm just a sexual being. When I'm feeling this way, I need to express it regardless of who or what is around.
Okay, I'm going to throw a curveball at you and ask you, does this include bestiality?
You're a mind reader. It does, and it's not that I was withholding that, but I didn't want to give it that leg just yet. But since you bring it up, it does. And, another reason why I didn't wish to bring it up just yet is because don't want to offend any animal activists, but the reality is there are those people that view that the exact same way.
Well, especially if you're saying that when the mood hits them, they can
Correct.
do whatever.
Correct. And I'm sure there's levels. Like, there's levels to everything.
Right.
In tiers. So like there might be a person that whole all sexual strictly for men and women. There might be those that, expound on that and expand it to include, animals. But in terms of the concept is that, I'm not into one specific type of being.
Right.
It's all beings. Now,
well, and understand that there have been many celebrities. Most recently, Miley Cyrus has come out talking about her pansexualism, and the way that she explains it, and several others sort of echo this idea that it's not the person, it's the personality. So, you're in a room with somebody, and just based on their personality, regardless of whether they're male, female, or quote-unquote non-binary, meaning that they don't choose. I don't, quite understand or comprehend how that is really something that exists. That's just not my reality. Because I unfortunately see things in black and white, and this is Fun and Truth in black and white. So,
and I'm black and you're white.
There you go. So the paradox of non-binary and then pansexuality to me is that you're kind of just saying, okay, based on how I'm feeling, the vibe I'm getting from you, regardless of who or what you are, right now I'm horny, let's do it.
So, here's what I wonder. Whenever I hear things like this, I wonder how the originals feel. And by the originals, what I mean there are people who genuinely feel this way.
Okay.
And then there are those who merely follow a trend.
Okay.
And
we're getting somewhere here.
For the parties who genuinely feel this way, like before it became a thing, before you could Google it, before there was feeds on YouTube and different websites about it. And, if a person felt that way, I wonder if they feel it's disingenuous for there to be this movement now.
Right.
Because I feel like the originals, I don't know why I'm calling them that, but you get my point. I wonder if they feel like these people are in it for today and they'll shift directions for tomorrow. They're not really riding with us on this subject.
Not only do you bring up that a good point, but I'm going to take it one step further. I bet you that the originals don't believe in pansexuality. They actually are far more understanding of who they are, but their willingness to be open in terms of their sexual needs and desires. And I'm gonna really dig into this from the standpoint that people who have mainstream thoughts or ideas, people who are kinky, people who are on the fringe of society in terms of their sexual deviance, are very, very introverted and careful not to let anybody know because they don't want that judgment or persecution brought onto them. So the originals that you're talking about are people that are, very careful to make sure that whoever they share this with, they really can trust and be intimate with.
But careful, and I know exactly what you mean, but I just think for the listeners, they might interpret the caution as fear. But it may not be that they're fearful. They might just be comfortable with who they are.
That's correct.
And around others who are like-minded. Now, the other thing, crossovers and change of directions.
Yeah.
The societal crossover and change of directions. It's a matter of convenience. Here's what I mean. I almost feel like there are segments of our population who are not comfortable in their own skin.
Mm-hmm.
So it's convenient for them to latch on to a movement. One that they may not even genuinely feel in their heart.
Right.
But just because there's strength in numbers and there's a comfortable feeling of being part of a group.
Yeah. I not only see where you're going, and I really I want to back up only because, again, based on the last segment, really looking at how things have changed after 9/11, do you feel or see that this idea of pansexuality and just the trend of openness in terms of sexuality really changed after 9/11? Do you think that it was something that was there before and this was going to happen anyway? Or do you think that because of 9/11, people really went in this direction? And obviously, it's almost 2 decades now, and it's been an accelerant.
I have a dual answer.
Okay.
So I'm a believer that everything has its quotient or its percentage of effect. So of the whole pie, is 9/11, does it have an effect on this? Even if it's minuscule, or even if it's grand, it has some effect because it was a major event in our history.
Yeah.
So it might be a blip, it might be a huge part of the pie, but it has some effect.
Right.
Primarily, though, I think it's the greatest invention of the world, of all time, which is the internet. What I mean by that is the internet has given a voice to the voiceless, right?
Yeah.
It's given a platform to the quiet,
A lot of introverts.
Yeah, I mean, the person, the voiceless, the weak, the meager, needs a keyboard and a screen or a phone. And they can say listen, half the people that write this show
Yeah.
and have negative things to say about us, which we welcome, because it's all good feedback.
Absolutely.
We love you guys. But if we did, they would never say it to our faces,
Yeah.
right? Let No, I'm not saying none of them. Mm-hmm. We've met one in person.
You know, hateration is still hydration.
Yeah. So, you know, it's just, I just think the fact that you can go online and pretty much be whoever you want to be and do whatever you want, say whatever you want, I think it is a great thing. Mm-hmm. But I think along the way, there's some fictitious, fraudulent, made up behavior.
So pansexuality, in your opinion, has
always been around.
But because of the younger celebrities now embracing it, has become a fashion trend.
I just think that there's a segment of it that's just that. And I think that segment has to anger those who truly feel it. Because those people who are doing it for the wrong reasons,
yeah,
they're going to fade out, right? They're not going to be around
right
7 years from now or 10 years from now. So I just think, you know, if I'm somebody who's truly living that life, I'm about that life, I'm looking at that person like, man, you're not really down for the cause.
Right.
You know? And that's it. Listen, Jay, it's commercial time.
Okay, we're going to take a break, but real quickly, I just want to respond on that very, very briefly and say that my challenge with pansexuality is that it is a matter of choice. And I agree with you that there are some originals and they are bothered by what's going on because for them, it was a very hard choice to be careful, to be selective. And what's happened is that as younger celebrities and younger people, because of the internet, have now been given this level of openness and liberal freedom in terms of deciding who they are and choosing their sexuality and choosing how they want to go about having relationships and engaging in sexual affection. The difficulty is making good choices, and pansexuality, being all-encompassing of, loving all sex, is a little bit, we just have to, remind ourselves that, choices are always a matter of what's best for you in the long run. And pansexuality kind of seems like it clouds judgment a little bit. So we'll take a break. We'll be right back. All right, we're back. This is Fun and Truth in Black and White with Pat and Jay. Pat, he can't come and I don't care. How do you fathom a woman deciding that she needs to ride you even though you're unable to achieve orgasm?
Let's give a little bit of context.
Okay.
That's the title of an article that the listeners
Where did this come from?
Right. Title of an article we found online. Jay sent it to me earlier. And the premise is, please restate.
So you've already busted a nut and the woman you're with gets off on the fact that now you're in the middle of it. You can't get to orgasm. You're getting frustrated, and that's getting her off. She's riding you even harder.
And your question to me is?
How do you fathom this? I mean, How do you, if you're in that situation, obviously...
That's two different questions. All right. First, how do I fathom it? The best part of intimacy is making the other person squirm. Right?
Okay.
Like getting your partner off is the best part. Because,
why?
Because even if, first of all, you should want that, right? That's
right.
Number one. But even if you're totally selfish and all about yourself, the things you will get your partner to do after they've got theirs far exceed what they'll do if they haven't gotten what they want.
Right.
So that's... First of all, whether you genuinely want them to be happy and pleased, or you're just trying to get them off so that they can turn around and return the favor and go extra hard, pun intended, for you. But so that's the best part of intimacy, or should be. And anyone who says otherwise is either inexperienced,
right,
or delusional.
Right.
And if they didn't know the following, I'm going to let them know now. Their mate is cheating on them.
Okay.
So let's get that out the way.
Fair enough.
So that's that. Now, how do I fathom it? There are people who, everybody has history. Unless your person you're dating is 12, right, years old, they have history, right? So they might have been in relationships with selfish lovers.
Okay.
And it's a very disheartening, weakening feeling, dissatisfying feeling to be with somebody that only cares about themselves.
Right.
So like you're there, you're performing these acts, and this person wants to hit it and go, get up and dash, whatever. So that person might be carrying that into the bedroom with the new person.
Mm-hmm.
So now they're like, that's never going to happen to me again.
Right.
And because you didn't say the guy came quick, you say the guy came.
Right. He
right?
already
right.
had his nut.
So now that person might be hopping on or still playing with what, because they haven't gotten theirs yet, or they got theirs and need more.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's easier for a woman once she achieves orgasm to continue
and
achieving orgasm.
There might be a situation where she's like, you know what? Now you know how it feels, even if he never did it to her before.
Okay.
She might be representing for all women against all women. She might be, or against all men. Might be thinking, now you know how it feels. So I think a lot of it might be. I guess what I'm saying is it comes down to your approach as you enter the bedroom.
Right.
Are you going into the bedroom, or a car, or elevator, or a stairwell?
into the intimate laboratory.
Are you going into the setting to knock this person's socks off, make their toes curl, or are you going in there to get yours?
Okay. Can you pass me the ball, please?
I just passed you. Hey, you still jumping high, Jay?
I'm still jumping high.
I'm throwing it off the backboard. You gotta.
This is a Herman helicopter alley-oop.
All right,
I got
come
you.
get it.
All right, so everything that you just described starts with one very important sexual organ, and that is the brain. However, I'm going to use it with a different term called the mind. And here's the difference between the brain and the mind. See, the brain is the largest sexual organ, but the mind is that sweet spot inside the brain that once you're turned on and you get in somebody's mind of their thoughts and you're completely tuned in to their five senses, how they smell, how they taste, how they feel. You're listening to their breathing. You're listening to their, movements. You're just completely in what's called, sensory overload. And you're having a sensorgasm with them. Keeping them on edge, keeping them from that climax is the thrill. So the person, whether it's male or female, if they are getting to a point of frustration because they want to come but they can't, the reason that that's an even bigger turn on for you is because you know that you've got them in a game of mercy.
Power trip?
Go ahead.
Control freak?
You got it.
So we're talking about...
You're in a full court press right now.
So we're talking about the fact that a huge stimulant is power.
Yes.
Interesting.
I'm going to go even further with you and say that a huge part of intimacy is the power exchange. So once you're inside each other's mind, once you're totally sensorily involved with each other, the exchange of energy, which is the power, going back and forth, is the intimacy. It's the fact that you have a total level of trust in each other that you're not trying to hurt each other, that you're not trying to torture each other. And if you are physically doing so, it is a part of the thrill, a part of the excitement, a part of the eroticism that is this whole fluid, I don't even know the right word to describe it, but that is the context that gets you off with each other. So you're not having a physical orgasm, but mentally you're already floating. You're already in the universe among the stars.
Okay, so good point. Very good point. I want to focus on the word trust that you mentioned, and then expound on that with the word comfort. This may be the most significant thing I ever said on this podcast.
Oh, I think everybody's ears just perked up.
Man, I kind of put pressure on myself. But the word, if your mate is truly comfortable with you and trusts you blindly, your sex life will be stratospheric. It is the most important, because what does it breed? It breeds confidence.
Mm-hmm.
It breeds security.
Yes.
If you're confident, you're secure, you trust someone, and you're comfortable,
mm-hmm.
you will completely express yourself. Whatever it is you want them to do, would like them to do, you'll tell them. Whatever it is you're curious about, you'll tell them. If you're insecure about something, you'll tell them.
Yes.
Like, everything's on the table. You can't fail.
Right.
But you eliminate trust, or you shake it. You create discomfort rather than comfort. Lack of confidence rather than confidence. And then you still enter the bedroom.
Right.
At least one of the two parties is trying to get in and out of there.
Agreed. So going back to the fact that the title of this episode is Crossovers and Change of Directions, this is part of the challenge of the bedroom, of the scene, of the situation.
Pass me the ball.
I'm going full court, bounce pass.
Pause. You're going to throw a 90-foot bounce pass?
I'm going to throw a 90-foot
I've only seen
pass.
Magic Johnson do that. I'm going to have to call your bluff on that. All right. But listen, you asked me a few minutes ago, what would I do? And I never answered.
That's right.
If that's happening, so I've came, I'm soft, I'm tired, I'm done, I'm cooked, right?
Right.
She's all over me.
Yeah.
Getting hers regardless. And she doesn't care if I come again.
That's right.
You know what you do in that situation?
Tell me, Pat. Give it to me.
Step your game up.
Uh-oh.
Even if at that moment you started out on some, it's all about me, blah, that's the moment of truth. At that moment in time, she's basically calling you out.
All right.
What are you going to do? Hold on. There's .004 seconds on the clock. You're at the free throw line. 2 shots. 1 ties the game. 2 wins the game.
Uh-oh.
All she's doing is handing you the ball.
Mm-hmm.
So in my opinion, in that situation, whoever it is, 2 people, partners. One partner's done, the other partner's not done.
You got to refocus.
Refocus.
Okay.
At that moment, you can cross over and change directions.
Okay.
Because if you come correct, pun intended, that's 2 of them today. You keeping count, right? All right. If you come correct, I'm not saying you're teaching that person a lesson, but you're letting them know when push comes to shove, I got you.
All right, I'm going to play defense on this one. You just shot, and my transition on this and trying to steal the ball from you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think Jay's stumped, and right now, I think.
Well, let's put it this way: we're in deep, and I gotta come up with something. Point 4. I gotta now take the ball full length. And do a Michael Jordan dunk.
You're down 1.
That's exactly
right.
right.
Let's see what you got.
And let's put it this way: the difficulty for me is that Now we're inside the mind. You've literally put the icing on the cake, and I got to come up with a candle and a cherry. But
Another pun.
And we're keeping
You know what?
count.
I shouldn't have done that. I'm going a little too far.
That's
All right.
okay. But hey, listen, it's fun and truth. But the opportunity that you have in the scene, in the bedroom, in the situation, in the moment, in each other's mind, you are 100% on point with that. This is where the crossover and change of direction is and where you go. So my point is that because you're no longer thinking about the other person or yourself, or maybe you're thinking about the other person instead of yourself. But the reason why I said you're no longer thinking of the other person is because now it suddenly becomes an experience where you meld together. You're no longer two, you're one. This is where intimacy goes to the next level and you become celestial. The ability to recognize that the thrill goes beyond the physical into the spiritual, into the metaphysical, into the energy in the atmosphere in the universe. Taking your sex life, taking your love life to a level beyond a human understanding of trust and comfort, to where you're amongst the moon and the stars from the standpoint that it's no longer about getting off. It's about staying in the moment with each other as long as you can. That is where the game can be won on another level. So that's my 0.4 second shot from across. That's my Trent Tucker on you, buddy. That's my Trent Tucker on you.
Well done. Two things I'll say. You get this right, you become one with your partner. The random gestures that you wish your partner would do for you on a daily basis, you'll suddenly see them get done.
You'll no longer be wishing. What you'll be wishing for in the future is for all the wonderful things of a life together.
Not only that,
that are abundance.
True love loves back. Now, you'll be doing those gestures too. And
Right.
it'll be, and the intimacy extends beyond the bedroom. And I don't mean in the literal sense like you're sleeping together all over the house. That too. Mm-hmm. But I mean like, intimate electronically through text, intimate phone calls, just random gestures. And one will affect the other. Next thing I'll say, I touched on it earlier. If you're not thinking about your mate and you're not about their pleasure and their satisfaction, someone else is.
Always. All right, let's take a break. We'll be right back. This is Fun and Truth in Black and White with Pat and Jay. All right, we're back. This is Fun and Truth in Black and White with Pat and Jay. Very important announcement for everyone. Pat, as much as I was getting ready to knock you out on Monday, November 25th, it's very important to let everybody know. Unfortunately, we have to accept our fight is being postponed. We are still going to raise money for our organizations, but we have to accept that due to circumstances beyond our control, we're going to be fighting next year. But we're going to start training now, man. We're going to do this together. We're going to raise money together. And next year, we're going to see who lasts in the ring.
For those who already donated, we are matching your contributions, and we are raising our goals. Thank you so much, and stay tuned for the invitation.
And again, Monday, November 25th. I apologize. Monday, November 25th, Long Island Fight for Charity. Even though we will not be fighting, we are supporting them and our causes. You will find out more on our website. Again, 11th Hour Productions or Fun and Truth in Black and White.podbean.com. And Pat?
Another announcement. So one pledge Jay and I have made to each other and to the listeners is being very open to feedback. in this case, we've gotten some feedback that was already in the cards for us. And it's finally about to materialize, come to fruition.
That's right.
We've been getting, if I had $1 for every time we got this email saying, when are you going to have guests? Let's get a third perspective on the show.
Yep.
Well, tune into the next podcast. We have a special guest joining us.
That's right. So going forward, we're going to do our best to have guests on the show to keep you guys entertained. Pat, it's time to give you my I don't give a fuck.
Let's hear it.
I don't give a fuck about fear. And here's what I mean. Get out of your comfort zone. Stop being afraid of what you don't know. Because until you start realizing that what you don't know can't hurt you, what you don't know is an opportunity to learn. There are things that you know not to do. You learned when you were a kid not to talk to strangers. However, when you were old enough, you learned to talk to strangers. When you were a kid, you learned don't cross the street unless you have the light. However, as you got older, you crossed the street whether you had the light or not. Change is going to come. Sam Cooke said it best. Accept in your life that whatever comfort you have absorbed is not where you need to be. It'll be there. Get out of your comfort zone and stop letting fear run your life. I don't give a fuck about fear.
Nice. Very nice. My PSA is that insecurities come from somewhere. They have an origin. So, step one, realize, recognize, and address your own insecurities. Their origin, why they exist, why they've gotten worse, why you bury it so deep. This will make you a better version of yourself. Then if you're in a relationship, and I don't necessarily mean an intimate one, it can be with a sibling, a friend, whomever, stop looking at that person like, what the hell is wrong with you? Stop thinking to yourself, why can't you just? And fill in the blank. You don't have to peel off the layers and know their innermost insecurities because that's personal. But understand those insecurities come from somewhere. And at minimum, refer to your own insecurities. And think about if you were naked. Like if your insecurities were totally exposed, think about how that would make you feel, right? So I just think insecurities come from somewhere. We all have them. And you should be more sensitive to them. You know, and in this case, I mean, all relationships, it could be a parent to a child. You know, it can be, spouses. Workplace is different, but in every personal relationship, you're carrying something. You wear black every single day because you think it makes you look thinner. Meanwhile, you might actually be thin, but in your mind, you're not, right? That's an insecurity. There's a long list of them, and the thing about insecurity, so many of them are visual. You can't hide them, right? So for the person that has a physical insecurity, they feel they can't hide it. For the person that has an insecurity, like it's in between their ears, they might compensate in other ways. Somebody that's always talking about money, probably has the most money issues. Mm-hmm. As you know, people that have the most money never talk about it.
Right.
Right? I mean, that's just one example, but I just think start with yourself, acknowledge your own, work on yourself, and I think you go out into the world and you have a better chance of dealing with people.
You know, I just want to end on the fact that from a change of direction perspective, and again, a basketball analogy, the opportunity to make a spin move or, get out of a double team from an insecurity perspective with a partner is one of the most amazing things, because the best part about it is that you're not doing it on your own. You can literally just pass them the ball and move down the court.
For once, we can link the I don't give a fuck to insecurities.
Yeah.
Because something else I'll say, once you acknowledge, accept, deal with your insecurities, then you cannot give a fuck. Because you know what else? The people you're insecure around, they have insecurities.
Yeah.
So they're no better than you.
Yeah.
They're no worse than you.
Isn't it amazing to realize that most people who have insecurities and anxieties, the people around them have the same things. They just don't share with each other.
That's correct.
All right. This has been Fun and Truth in Black and White with Pat and Jay. Thursday, October 3rd. Monday, November 25th. But Thursday, October 3rd is our next event. Live at the Mini Bar in Brooklyn with DJ Mikey Palm spinning. Shout out to him. Thank you, everyone, for listening. We love you.
Peace and love.
All right.